I appreciate, oh, there we go, all the work that Pitt has been doing to, gardens for pollinators and all those things on campus to help make, downtown Oakland a nicer place to live and work and learn. So I just kind of want to continue that and give you some information today on planting for pollinators. So I'm going to jump right in as Sam said. So why do we think about planting for pollinators? The first thing that many of you may realize is that pollinators contribute to crop production. So depending on the information that you find, I've seen like a quarter to a third of our crops are reliant solely on animal pollinators. In the United States here, that means our almond production, blueberries, and a lot of crops like that are need animal pollinators to set fruit and be able to have a good harvest for us. So in addition, if you just think about the plant world, plants, 80 to 90% of plant species require animal pollination. And that's just, so that they can set seeds and continue to grow themselves. So very necessary for the natural ecosystem to just kind of continue and thrive. Very important that, pollinator populations have decreased around the world. A few years ago, there was an article that went out calling it the insect apocalypse, that we've really are just losing a lot of our insects. A lot of native insects are endangered. A large portion of that is due to habitat loss, as well as the use of pesticides and things like that. And so our talk today will think about, okay, how can we use our backyards, our front yards, to create more habitat to help these populations continue. And for me, personally, I just find it really fun. I just think they're beautiful, entertaining to go out there and watch these critters kind of move through your property. This slide here is sort of a checklist, for what we need to create a pollinator habitat, and it will also kind of be the agenda for today, because all of these points I'll go into greater detail on. Aside from the first one is pretty straightforward. If we're trying to invite these insects into our property, we don't want to be out there, spraying synthetic chemicals, pesticides, fungicides, or even herbicides that can affect their populations. So, try to, if you can, stop using those products, or just, limit their use and see if you can find some other alternatives. But for the rest of these, we'll go into greater detail. So, planting natives is very important. We'll talk about why, and I'll give you some ideas for native plants to use. Providing larval host plants. This basically means really for our, well, it actually could apply for both, but when we talk about host plants, we're talking about butterflies. The bees, I was thinking, also have, they use some of the plants for their young. They lay eggs and then have larvae that are developing as well. But really, this here we're focusing on butterflies, and we'll talk about that. In addition, you want to have plants that provide pollen and nectar. These should be different shapes and sizes. Really having a diversity of plants will attract, a very diverse population of insects. You want to have your plants blooming from early spring through late fall, so that you have a food source available, and bees and butterflies are constantly kind of taken care of, and they don't have to travel too far to find more food. You want to plant in drifts, and I'll give you some examples of what that means. Provide water, and make sure that you save your garden maintenance until the spring, and we'll find out why that's important. So native plants. Native plants are defined by a region. So generally what we would say is native to Pennsylvania or native to Southwest Pennsylvania. So these are plants that will provide shelter and food for our wildlife and our pollinators. They'll attract more pollinators than non-native varieties. So there've been a few studies recently looking at cultivated varieties of our native plants and trying to understand, will pollinators go to both? Will they go to one or the other more? And what was found is that yes, they will go to they'll go to both. They will go to some of our cultivated varieties, but for the most part, and when in doubt, you want to plant natives. Also, it's important because they're adapted to our local soil and climate conditions. So that means that if you choose native plants, especially if they are native to your specific region, and you've matched them to the type of soil and the sunlight that you have, that these plants will do well. They won't need any additional care, pest control, things like that. All right, I will be focusing mainly today on butterflies and bees, as I've mentioned. I did want to sort of give a little shout out to moths, because I think that moths are, kind of ignored, and people just don't like moths. But I want to say that they are important pollinators. Our butterflies are pollinating during the day, and moths they take over the night shift. So they're very important. And they can be very beautiful and interesting. It's just that we don't always get to see them. But to have respect for kind of all of the critters that will be visiting your garden. All right, so focusing here again on bees and butterflies, I want to start with butterflies. And then in parentheses here, I have hummingbirds, because some of the same plants that attract butterflies will attract hummingbirds. So the shape here, having a nectar-rich tubular or trumpet shape, butterflies love, but the hummingbirds also can get their longer beaks in there. So they like that same shape, and they also will be attracted to these brighter colors. So reds, oranges, and yellows will bring in both. And for butterflies especially, we will focus on larval host plants, and I'll talk to some detail on that. I do have a link here at the bottom. If you're interested specifically in hummingbirds and attracting hummingbirds, there's this great article by Penn State Extension where you can learn more. And hummingbirds are pollinators, but they're not like the top pollinators. So they're not as kind of important for pollination. They're just also very pretty, and it's fun to have them in our gardens. All right, so what is a larval host plant? These are plants that adult butterflies depend upon to raise their young. So they will seek out these plants, and the female butterflies lay their eggs directly onto the host plant of their choice. And each butterfly species has specific plants that their caterpillars will enjoy. So I like to think about this. This just came to me recently that, let's say about 10 years ago, maybe even 10, 15 years ago, I was working on, a butterfly garden. And really at that time, we were focusing on the flowers, making sure that you had nectar, rich plants that would attract butterflies. But when we don't think about the larval stage, when we don't think about the caterpillars, really what we're planting is sort of, like a nightclub where only the adults will be attracted to. What we want to start doing in our gardens is creating more family-friendly environments. And so we have to think about, okay, what do caterpillars like? What do these caterpillars eat? And it's different, it's different from the bright, colorful flowers. So I do have a few slides on this because it's very important. This study was done by Doug Tallamy and some others. And, looking at what are the most important plants for these caterpillars, how can we support the young of our butterflies? Well, they found that oak trees were sort of number one for being able to feed the most species of different caterpillars. And oaks were found to provide food for, I want to say it was like 500 to 600 different caterpillars. So, if you can only plant one plant, select one of these keystone species that will really provide for a lot of caterpillars. And if you take a quick look at this list, you'll see a lot of trees, and you think about it, caterpillars are eating leaves. So they're not getting pollen, they're not getting nectar, they're eating leaves. And so, you get the most amount of leaves off of something large like a tree or a shrub. So that's, generally what we'll be looking for our caterpillar host plants. What I like to do with lists like this is first I go through and I look and I say, hey, what do I already have? I have some blueberries. Oh, what else did I have on here? Oh, I do have a cherry tree. And then it's like, okay, what else could I possibly plant? Could I fit any of these things? Now, viburnums are nice, smaller shrubs. Oh, brambles, I have a bunch of those, and so thinking about what can you add or what do you currently have that provides for caterpillars. So I wanted to just give you an example here. This is a tiger swallowtail feeding on the black cherry. And this is the butterfly that it turns into, and you'll see again, the butterflies are on the flowers getting nectar, whereas the caterpillars are eating the leaves. Another study I wanted to just share with you was printed in the LA Times. And what they found was that this says the title here is Diverse Diet Makes Caterpillars More Likely Target for Birds. But if you think about the opposite, what it really means is that caterpillars with a more sort of selective or specialized diet were eaten less by birds. The reason for that being because they've developed over time this very unique special relationship, and they've developed camouflage, and so you can actually kind of see how this caterpillar sort of blends in. It has this little orange mouthpiece that looks, very similar to the orange spots that this plant gets. So, understanding that our caterpillars need and rely on specific plants. This was just to show you some, kind of a pretty example. It shows you the different caterpillars, the host plants here, and then the adults that they turn into. One great source for plants, for caterpillars is this from the National Wildlife Federation. If you put in your zip code, and you can see here I have 15207, that's my zip code, it will give you a list of native plants, specifically those plants that are hosts to caterpillars. And what it will do, you can see here with the goldenrod is a host to 126 butterfly and moth species. So, if you, again, are limited by space, you can only plant a few plants for pollinators, you may want to just kind of find some of these keystone host plants. I wanted to highlight some of these for you so you kind of get a better idea. Most of us know about, milkweed for monarchs. And milkweed, monarchs are very specialized. They only will eat milkweed, the caterpillars. And they've created this very special relationship, over, thousands of years of eating this plant. They're able to eat it in a way where, this plant has toxins in it. It doesn't affect the caterpillars. And in fact, the caterpillars kind of get some of that toxin in them, and the butterflies then are toxic to birds that try to eat them. So, they've gained a lot of benefits from relying on this one plant. These other really fun butterflies, some people, pull out violets. They don't like violets in their lawn. They think of them as weeds. Well, we won't have the great spangled fritillary if we don't have violets, so understanding these connections is very important. I don't want to go into all of these for you, but just to kind of highlight, some of these pretty butterflies and what they rely on. I want to tell you this quick story. So this is a picture that I took from my yard. One of my favorite plants is elderberry. So this is my elderberry tree, and I found this caterpillar and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And I love the bright colors, and it's got these primary little spikes sticking out of it. It was so cool. I was able to identify that this caterpillar will turn into this moth. The Cecropia moth is the largest moth in Pennsylvania. It is one of the largest moths in the United States. So how cool is it that we can support this, this animal just by planting an elderberry? Very exciting. So if you want to, learn more about caterpillars, or, help kind of identify the caterpillars that you find, this is one resource I wanted to share with you. All right. Sorry, I'm going to move on to native bees unless there's any questions that have come up. Feel free to, in the chat box, put a question. Sam could share that, or, otherwise let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to answer throughout. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to native bees. So Pennsylvania has about 400 native bees, and across the United States, it's closer to about 4,000. So, oftentimes we think about, like the sweat bees, the bumblebees, we could probably only list maybe 4 or 5 different types of bees, when in reality we have 400 here in Pennsylvania, which is really exciting. These native bees are solitary, which means they're non-aggressive. So they don't have a big hive that they're trying to protect. They're really just out, finding pollen and nectar, and they're, hoping to raise their young. Bees are attracted to purple, blue. Originally this said purple, blue, and yellow, but the more I found is really bees are attracted to white as well. And then I was thinking, well, it's a lot of the colors. Really, you should know that the bees can't see red. So whereas the red will bring in your butterflies, if you really want to focus on your bees, it's almost like any other color other than red, will attract our native bees. These are kind of their favorite colors, I guess. The other thing that is important is to know that flowers with single blooms, like this echinacea here that has this is our native echinacea, has just a single bloom, provides more nectar than the double bloom. So this is what it looks like with a double bloom. You get this extra kind of poof of flowers up here, and you can see how it's way more challenging to kind of get to the nectar and the pollen, while it's in here. So if possible, don't plant those, just focus on the single blooms. All right, so other things, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of all the different flowers we could put in for our native bees. So there's a lot of different annual flowers, sunflowers, definitely, cosmos. This is a picture of poppy, zinnias. A lot of these kind of summer flowers that people will plant are very beneficial. Perennial flowers, again, lots of choices. I just put in a few examples here. So yarrow, hyssop, black-eyed Susan, coreopsis coneflower, bee balm, Russian sage. Also want you to know that, bees will come to vegetables. So bees, cucumbers, peas, summer and winter squash. And actually, as I think about this, I hadn't, really, I don't know, focused on the native plants, and the reason, I don't know, maybe I did, but all of these, as I'm looking at these vegetables, are all native. If you think about, learning about Native Americans and indigenous people to the United States, planted corn, beans, and squash. So they've been around for a long time, and there are bees that will pollinate those different plants. Now, our herbs are kind of different. A lot of our herbs that we use, oregano, rosemary, lavender, those are not native, but they will still, feed our bees, and you'll see bees on all of your, a lot of your edible, culinary herbs. So I like to include those. And definitely fruits, as we mentioned earlier, brambles are great host plants for our butterflies, but they also, their flowers will feed our bees. Just a word on specialist bees. So this is sort of similar to, the moth caterpillars that will only eat specific plants. There are bees that have evolved with one plant that they really rely on. So this bee here, only eats spring beauty. It eats the, pollen from the spring beauty. And so areas where you have spring beauty flowers, you'll find this bee. And if you don't have that flower, you won't have that bee. Same here with the native loosestrife, which is a yellow flower. And this bee here that the loosestrife bee that visits that. And then our squash bee, as I've mentioned, squash is native to the United States, and there is a bee that only visits squash. And so if you do plant squash this summer, check out the flowers and look for those bees, because that's kind of a neat thing there. Another study, was looking at this relationship and trying to understand these, what they call pollen specialist bees. So these bees that, rely on a single plant. And what they found was that the aster family was able to support. So aster family plants, supports the like greatest number of these pollen specialists. So again, if you weren't sure what to plant, you say, hey, I love the aster family. They have, that's where echinacea is, daisy. Actually, a lot of the plants that we've talked about, if you plant a bunch of asters, hopefully you'll be supporting some of these specialist bees as well. All right, I have two plant lists here, and both of these links you can click on to find more information and find some ideas on specific plants, to attract. And this here is for both bees and butterflies. In fact, this second list here, you can actually go down and see, okay, which pollinators are attracted. You can see they've listed hummingbirds as well. And it also indicates which plant is a host plant. So this one here from the Pollinator Partnership is very helpful. I believe Sam will share a copy of my slides with you, so you'll be able to click these links. To highlight some of the plants, for our pollinators, I want to focus on a few things. So first is that you can plant in different levels, so we talked about trees, shrubs, perennials, vines, so having all this different variety of plants is really good. So I'm going to focus on some trees for you. Serviceberry is a very nice kind of low growing tree. It can actually be in a tree or shrub form. Serviceberries has beautiful spring flowers, and you'll see bees, kind of covering that, humming and working all over those. In the summer, serviceberry creates an edible berry, which the birds love. People can eat it too. And then in the fall has a really lovely fall color. So it's a great plant for the landscape. Hawthorn is another tree that I just really love. It will supply some pollen and nectar for our pollinators. It also has an edible fruit for the birds. And are just really gorgeous plants. The hawthorn that I like is called Winter King, which grows between like 25 to 35 feet, like high and wide. So it's a pretty decent, plant for the garden. It doesn't get 50, 60 feet like that. All right, so just a few shrubs to mention. I had talked about elderberry. St. John's wort is a native shrub that has these really lovely yellow flowers that the bees really love. And there is also a native St. John's wort perennial. So you can get, if you don't have room for a shrub, you can get the perennial. But the St. John's wort, it doesn't get very big. It's maybe 3 to 4 feet, kind of high and wide. It's just sort of a nice sized shrub. Spice bush can get a little bit larger. Spice bush is a good shrub for the shade, so it's more shade tolerant. And spice bush is, again, the only host plant for this. It's the spice bush swallowtail. So if you see this caterpillar, know that it turns into this beautiful butterfly. One thing I do want to say about butterfly bush, I think it's important that people know, because when I was first gardening, I did not know. I didn't know that butterfly bush is considered invasive in Pennsylvania. And I bought two, and so I still have one in my yard. And it's kind of hard. I'll probably eventually take it out, but just a few things to say about the butterfly bush. Butterfly bush does attract, again, it's sort of your candy store, or, I made that nightclub analogy. So it's going to bring in a lot of adult butterflies. It is not a host for any caterpillars. And like I said, it is considered invasive in Pennsylvania. So it will spread. It spreads a lot by seeds. So if you have a butterfly bush and you want to make sure that it's not spreading to the forests, and kind of out competing our native plants, you can deadhead it after blooming. So kind of cut off those dead blooms, and that'll make sure that those seeds, the seeds don't spread. And I have some alternatives here for you. Narrow leaf meadow sweet, Spirea alba is a really nice, kind of, again, smaller shrub for you. So this will get, well, potentially 8 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide, really like sort of can tolerate wetter soils. New Jersey tea is a nice alternative as well. Again, it's a native shrub. It is nitrogen fixing, so it's actually adding nitrogen into the soil, and provides for our pollinators. And the sweet pepper bush, also native, is a host plant to some butterflies, and gets about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. This one, though, can spread by its roots. So you might want to think about that. If you have a space where, maybe you want to develop a hedge or something like that, this could be a good plant for you. It is tolerant of the shade. So, full sun to part shade. So just some different options for you. And I know butterfly bush has those fun colors and is much brighter than these white flowers. But if you think about, selecting a lot of colorful flowers in your perennials, having a white flowered shrub can help to highlight those. All right, so focusing on some different perennials. And again, we want to make sure that we're providing food from early spring through late fall. So making sure, we have some ideas for all of those times. Starting here with phlox. This is our native phlox, really beautiful flower, attracts a lot of butterflies. Wild geranium, I really enjoy. It has pretty flowers and really nice kind of delicate leaves. It will tolerate some shade, so it's sort of a part shade. It's a little bit more of a ground cover, so it will kind of stay low to the ground. This is our native bleeding heart, the fringed bleeding hearts. So again, if you have the opportunity, focusing on our natives, I do have, I want to say it's an Asian variety of bleeding heart, probably the kind that you're most sort of familiar with. Is not native, but it will, in the spring, I see it covered in bumblebees, so some of these plants, like I said, the either non-native or cultivated varieties will also attract our pollinators. But, if we want to focus on natives. So wild lupin, maybe this isn't the best picture. I wanted to make sure that all of my flowers had pollinators on them. So you could kind of see these examples. But wild lupin, I think, is just a gorgeous flower. It's also a nitrogen fixer. So again, it's increasing the soil fertility of the space where you plant it. Wild lupin likes a lot of sun. All right, these are my favorite summer blooming plants. You're probably all familiar with milkweed. This is a swamp milkweed, so it's a little bit different than the common milkweed. Common milkweed can really spread. Swamp, kind of, I haven't seen it spread. It's more of a clumping plant, and it has these beautiful pink flowers. It likes a little bit more wet soil. Purple coneflower. You can see here the bees love it, butterflies love it. It's just all around beautiful plant. And this Joe Pye weed, I really love. The native Joe Pye weed can get quite tall. It gets about 8 foot, and it just can get really big, especially if it's in an area that it likes. This is a variety called Little Joe that is much shorter. So I want to say about 3 to 4 feet high. It's a little friendlier in your landscape and will still attract a lot of butterflies. So late blooming perennials, again, making sure we have flowers that are still blooming in the fall. Two that I just love these, the closed bottle gentian, the white turtle head, because you can see the bumblebees when they crawl in and their little butts are sticking out. It's just the cutest. So those are fun fall plants. New England aster, these can get, quite big and, kind of bushy with a lot of flowers on them. So attract a ton of pollinators. And in the background here, you can see goldenrod. There's such a nice combination of, asters and goldenrod. They're both late fall plants. And so you can really help to feed your pollinators as they're getting ready for winter. Cardinal flowers, this really fun red flower that, again, butterflies love. The hummingbirds really enjoy it. So this is a nice fall plant as well. All right, just a couple vines here. If you have this space for them, trumpet vine can be a little bit aggressive. So I like to suggest planting trumpet vine potentially along a fence line where both you and your neighbor will mow, just so, because it can kind of spread through the grass, or just in a space where you're able to kind of mow around it and really contain it. Coral honeysuckle is our native honeysuckle. So, really great for butterflies. And this actually here is a moth. This is the sphinx moth. It's also called a hummingbird moth because really when it's moving around, it has this big body and it looks like a hummingbird, but kind of cool to see these in the garden. So question came in about where to find these plants. I will be talking about that towards the end. So just hold on for that answer. We'll get there. All right. Here's just another place to find plant lists. So if you're looking for, hey, what should I plant? So Phipps has what we call the Sustainable Plant Finder. So this is the website here. If you go to the home page, it's hard to find, but if you put in /plant/ -finder, you'll get to this page. So every year we've suggested our top 10 sustainable plants. What this website does is it brings in all of those plants from every year, and it helps you to search it, and be able to eliminate some different options and find what you're looking for. On the left side, you'll see just different categories here. And if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see, I think it says something like ecological features or ecological characteristics, something like that. And you can actually search for plants that produce pollen, plants that produce nectar, host plants native to southwestern Pennsylvania. So clicking on these will help to kind of eliminate, sorry, I just knocked over something, to kind of narrow down our selections and have good plant lists specific to your needs. All right. So earlier I had mentioned the idea of planting in drifts. So a drift really is kind of a collection of the same plant. So having that repetition. So here it's suggesting, having 3 or 5 or 7 of the same plant. Really what this does is it gives you kind of this larger kind of a swath of plantings. It gives you this bigger kind of look. And it makes it easier for the pollinators to find, so they're not searching around for each individual plant, but you have this kind of large, if you think of that as kind of like a large landing path, like, hey, there's food for pollinators, it really helps to bring them into the garden. All right, other things we can do for our pollinators. is make sure that we have water, water sources. Ideally, what butterflies really love is they love a little like a little mud puddle. What they do is if they visit mud puddles like right after a rain, if they'll get water, but they also will pick up minerals from that water. So we can kind of replicate that with these things here are called, I think they're called puddling stones. But if you looked up like puddler or butterfly puddler, it has this little depression where you can put in just a little bit of water and you kind of sprinkle in some sand, and that when the butterfly comes to visit, it gets the water, but again, it gets some of the minerals that are in that sand. Bees need water as well. For our bees, we want to have shallow dishes. And I liked this image, with the rocks, because the bees can kind of crawl in and out. Anything deeper, like if we have bird baths and things like that can be too deep. So our bees can drown in those. But if we have something a little bit more shallow for them, it is helpful to have some access to water. And this is very important. It used to be that our perennial gardens, gardeners would always go out in the fall and like cut back everything. They cut back all this dead material. What we're starting to do is we're starting, number one, to kind of change the garden aesthetic and say, hey, like, isn't this beautiful? Like, look how fun this is with the different textures, and you can kind of see the waves of the grass, and so really appreciating this. And the benefit is to our pollinators, because over winter our pollinators will kind of find homes in our in this dead, decaying material. So pollinators will overwinter in different stages. So there may be eggs, larvae, pupae, or adults, kind of hidden in here. And they hide in different places. So hollow stems and leaf litter are two examples. And hollow stems, really, that is for our bees. So our native bees, and there's kind of two different types. There's native bees that we call ground nesters. So they're going to have their nests underground. Another type is cavity nesters, and those will kind of create these little nests in hollow stems. So if you're cutting all this down, putting it out for the trash or for the debris pickup, you're really just kind of eliminating a lot of your future pollinators. In leaf litter, a lot of the butterflies will, have either cocoons or other stages of their life kind of in that leaf litter. So we don't want to cut down our perennial gardens until spring. You want to leave it up all winter, kind of learn to appreciate this look. And then in April, kind of mid to late April, go ahead and cut that back. All right, I'm going to keep moving because I want to just give you two examples, and then I have some information on sources as well. So, if you think about, well, how do I apply this information? What is it going to look like? There's sort of two options I can think of, is either a meadow or a garden bed. Main difference here is that meadows can be a little bit more wild, sort of natural aesthetic, whereas a garden bed is more manicured, more structured, and you have a little bit more control. So let's take a look at these two examples. These are, meadows. This is actually a first year planting. When you first plant your meadow, you're going to get in a lot of annuals, a lot of these really pretty colorful plants, and you can plant them in, small spaces. It doesn't need to be, a whole football field. It could be your backyard. It could be just a small space that you have for these. What I want you to know is that over time, what happens is those annuals will die away. Next year, you'll have, probably black-eyed Susans. It seems to be black-eyed Susans are the, the second year flower that comes up. And then over time, you'll have a diversity of perennials that come up. And, just to kind of see the different looks, this is all from the same meadow. This is Boyce Park Meadow. Really fun video if you click on this link here. And again, you can see what it looks like in the fall and leave all of that material up to kind of keep a home for our pollinators through the winter. Site preparation is very important for our meadows. You want to eliminate, if you're starting from grass, you want to eliminate all that grass and any potential weeds that could be in there. So I have some pictures. We planted a small meadow in my backyard. This is my husband on a dry day. You can really, very easily, I thought it was going to be much harder, but very easily kind of remove the sod and you have a nice fresh area. Ideally, what you do is you wait a week, let all the weeds come up, remove those, maybe wait 2 weeks, keep removing the weeds, and then you plant in here. I planted some plugs. You can also see scattering. I planted seeds as well. You really only need to do one or the other. This is a bit overkill. This is what it looked like first year. So you can see all those seeds sprouted. A lot of plants are coming up. And I got that first year, real brightly colored annuals that came up. And so we'll see what happens this year. But just so you know, again, I'm not going to go through all this information. We're sort of getting to the end, but I wanted to make sure you had it in case you did want to start a meadow. Make sure that you're selecting seeds for our region. You have a good mixture of seeds. They should all be native varieties and for the specific conditions of your yard. So most meadow plants will be, sun loving. So you should have at least 5 to 6 hours of sun. This is just if you want to plant, how much seed do I need? So use this here. So about a quarter to a half a pound of seed for every 500 square feet. So you really want to, figure out how big your area is. And then, with 500, you can divide it in half, multiply by 2, use this as a good idea just to kind of see, how much seed do I need? All right, so here's some sources for seeds. American Meadows has these fantastic native pollinator mixes. And again, you can find, so this is Northeast, so it's for our region. And I just want to kind of point out here, the cost this is per quarter pound. It changes depending on the different site that you go to. Another source here is Prairie Nursery. Again, they have these native seed mixes. These ones you can select for pollinators. You can also select for the different type of soils. So do you have medium soils, dry soils, wet soils, and how big? Meadows can sometimes get quite tall. So if you want a low growing meadow, they have a good mix for that. And again, this pricing is for per quarter acre, half pound, quarter pound, pound. Just make sure you're aware of that. Now, Ernst Seeds is out of Meadville, so they're more of sort of a local seed supplier. They will have seeds native to our region. You can select, this right here says mesic to dry native pollinator mix. So this is a mix specific for sort of more the drier conditions. And you can find some that are, more for very wet conditions. Again, this was 33 per pound. So I thought that was actually pretty good price here per pound. All right, so how do we plant it? You want to mix that seed because what you're getting is pure seed. Mix it in something to kind of give it some bulk. And this is just kind of show you you're going to broadcast that seed and you want to walk, north and south, east and west, and get a really good coverage of seed. You want to kind of pat it down. You don't want to bury it. Don't cover your seed. Make sure you water. Keep it watered. It's going to germinate with that, say 10 to 20 days. So make sure you keep that wet. And here's some good sources for you. So Mini Meadows, this is the book that I really used. It's a fantastic book. A lot of great ideas for, meadows that we can do. I live in the city. So if you're in Pittsburgh or in, the suburbs outside, this is a great book with some good ideas for you. All of these books here are from the Xerces Society. So they focus on, helping our pollinators. So they have, butterflies and bee books, and these things are great. All right, pollinator garden beds. So this is a slightly different look. Like I said, it's a little bit more control because you're selecting each plant where it goes. I want to give you some examples here. So these are all from we did a Sustainable Garden Awards last year. We're doing another one this year. So if you have a beautiful garden and you're in Western Pennsylvania, let me know and I'll tell you more about that. This was in Unity Township. You can actually see here, she has a pollinator friendly garden. She got certified through Penn State Extension. And I love this. Look how pretty that is through the winter, so leaving up your plants through the winter. And she's got a nice big swath here, a nice planting of echinacea. You can see some of her other plantings here. Sally Foster, she won first place for the native plant garden. It's a beautiful native garden. And I love how she has this, you keep some grass, mow your grass for a pathway, and then have these, on the sides, on the edges, the native plants. This is a great example in a more sort of suburban garden. Again, she has the plantings in the front, along the front sidewalk, along her house, but then she's kept some grass. I like this look because it tells your neighbors, I'm taking care of this. This is on purpose. I'm not just letting, weeds get crazy. And again, she is certified with Penn State. She has a pollinator friendly garden. And I just think it's beautiful. It's just so lovely with all the pretty flowers. And again, she has some shrubs, she has some trees. So there's a good variety here. This was another garden that I really loved. This was from North Huntington, Pennsylvania. They had this great combination of their their play garden. It was like a play, their playground. The garden was right next to it, so it kind of invites the kids to come and interact with the garden. And especially when she's planting all these plants for pollinators. I just thought that was really fun. So you can see the milkweed. This is that honeysuckle, and some really nice varieties. And again, it's not all pretty flowers. She has some different variety of trees, and a lot of these, I know the river birch especially is a host plant to butterflies. A lot of good variety of shrubs. Let's see here, elderberry we talked about, viburnum, high bush blueberries, those are all host plants. She has that native honeysuckle, and then actually 4 varieties of milkweed. So getting a really good diversity in here is important, and some different perennials. I also wanted to show you they can be small. So this was in our micro garden category. Drew, he also had a native garden. His garden is 5 feet by 25 feet. So it's very small. And he said, hey, I want to dedicate this space, all natives, or mostly natives, actually, because I don't believe that, I'm actually not sure about hostas, but I don't believe they are native, but he has a lot of natives. And he's certified as a backyard habitat through the Audubon. So both these programs, the Audubon's program or Penn State Extension, will help to kind of guide you through, what do you need to make these habitat areas. This again is Drew's garden, and he has some grass. Again, actually, I think that might be his neighbor's side of the property, but you can see a good variety here, and he has a little dish here for water. And just, the native grasses. It's just a nice kind of wild look to it. One last example I have for you is from Cranberry Township. This garden is actually on a hillside, so you can kind of see the slope here. I also wanted to kind of show you how she did. Now she doesn't have a swath in that, she doesn't have all of these plants like touching each other, but you can see the repetition. So black-eyed Susan, black-eyed Susan, black-eyed Susan, black-eyed Susan, you kind of see how it moves through the landscape. And that helps to kind of move the pollinators through. Oh, okay. So the question came up about having a dish, but not encouraging mosquitoes. Generally, you want to keep. So a few things. The shallow dishes will evaporate pretty quickly. So I've actually seen, my little butterfly puddler. It's I almost have to fill it. I have to fill it often. Sometimes it goes dry because I'm not out there filling it. The bigger things, like I have a bird bath that I maintain. Generally, your mosquitoes need 3 full days. Is it 72 hours to to go through their whole process, for the eggs to be laid and for them to kind of hatch out. So as long as you're changing out the water every 3 days, you're not going to have a mosquito population. And actually, I change out my bird bath once a week, and I've never had mosquitoes in it. So you don't want to just have a dish of water and just leave it forever. It will get you'll see it, yeah, especially if the animals are using it, they drink water, they go to the bathroom, it gets kind of yucky. So you'll have to change it out. And so just make sure that you're changing out your water sources. So here's some sources for the plants. Now, when you're creating kind of a large garden and you're doing it all at once, planting from plugs is the best way to go. So plugs are smaller. I'll show you an example of what a plug looks like. And I love this idea. So Prairie Nursery has a pollinator garden kind of pre-planned for you. So you tell them, where you're located, full sun, what your soil conditions are. And they say, hey, here's this pre-packaged garden for you. It'll even come with kind of a design, a layout of like where to put the plants. This is a great value for the cost. I don't think I included the cost here, but say it's $150. If you go to a nursery, each plant pot is going to be, I'd say $8 at your cheapest to, it could be up to $20 per plant, so getting these plugs is very cost effective. This is another example of these plugs. Now this one, I want to say it was about like 24 plants for $140. You'll see there, they are these small little plugs, so they're smaller, but they'll take off very quickly for you. I have purchased from Prairie Moon. These are the plugs that I used for my kind of instant pollinator garden, and they worked well. All right, so a little bit more local. ISIL Nurseries. This is an online kind of catalog nursery. You get large quantities. So this is something you'd want to work, if you worked with a neighbor. I mean, it would be great for like a school, so Pitt, if Pitt was doing a larger planting, this is good. And they have, because again, you're getting a large quantity of the same plant, the cost goes down. These are all natives again that they sell. The most local that we have, again, that focuses on natives is the Audubon Society Native Plant Center. So I have the address here. That's in Dorseyville Road. So it's north of the city. They have fantastic native plants, great selection, very knowledgeable. And, it's hard to say as far as any other local nursery. I've seen a lot of local nurseries are having more and more native plants. But if we all go out and we ask for native plants, then they'll know that we want them. So they'll start to supply more. So, go to Audubon, order some of these online, and, go to your local nursery and tell them that you want natives. That's the best advice I can give. Now, how to plant these, I have some few examples. We're sort of running out of time. So, again, Sam will have this for everyone. If you go to this website here, DCNR, it kind of gives you this, it's got a list of plants. It tells you where to put them, and it's, it's planting these drifts. So it's a really good example. These are the plugs here. You want to make sure you have good spacing. Always, anytime you water anything, make sure you water it, and you want to keep new plants watered as they develop. All right, so I'm going to stop here, and I think I did see another question come in the chat, so I want to I think that was everything. So any other questions? I've got 2 minutes by my clock. I'm happy to answer them. Just, either put them in the chat, or if you want to mute yourself, you could do that. I will say I did share this slide deck with Sam. I also shared with her a link to an article that I wrote on planting for pollinators. So what that does is it kind of puts all this information very succinctly for you, and it includes a lot of clickable links. So anything you want to learn more about, I have links for you, and you can kind of expand on that and learn more. My name again, Juliette. I have my email address here. I'm happy to respond to any questions if you want to email me. And this phone number is for the Dr. Phipps line. If you have any plant questions, house plants, anything, you call this number, you leave a voicemail message, and a master gardener will get back to you. So thanks so much for your time today. I really enjoyed speaking with you all, and hope that you've found this useful.